All right, so let's take a look at this. It really is interesting. President Trump's ratings are actually going up, and I predict they're going to continue to go up unless there's some terrible disaster. Politico has a big article out now that the Democrats have thrown everything at this guy, everything. I mean, Russia, his base sticks with him, and once he starts to do well, and certainly once the economy takes off, people who weren't with him before will also be with him. And so everything they've done, it just hasn't worked. So last night, President Trump had a dinner with 3 Democrats and I think 4 Republican senators to talk about pushing his tax reform deal. He knows he's going to need some Democrats on there if Mitch McConnell's not going to get rid of this ridiculous filibuster rule. He knows he's going to need maybe 60 votes. Maybe they can do it through reconciliation and get it through. That's also possible. But this comes on the heels of his making this deal with, as we now call them, Chuck and Nancy. Now, suddenly from crying Chuck and crazy Nancy Pelosi, they're Chuck and Nancy, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. He made this deal to extend the debt ceiling only 3 months when the Republicans, and certainly the conservatives, were touting their 18-month plan. They wanted to keep it going. Now, Mitch McConnell, by the way, I just should add this in there, that Mitch McConnell says that it's not really 3 months. It'll be spring before they have to deal with the debt ceiling because they're allowed to move money around, all these kind of complex Senate rules. But also, Donald Trump is now pushing passage of the DREAM Act. I mean, Bush couldn't do it. Obama couldn't do it. He's not only saying wants passage of the DREAM Act, he's tweeting to Dreamers, don't worry, even though we've rescinded the executive order against Dreamers, we're not going to throw you out of the country, and we're not going to take any action while Congress is dealing with this. So we're not going to, we're not going to come after you. So, I mean, this comes after, let's face it, we remember all those meetings, those rallies that he held, where they were screaming, build the wall, still happening when he does rallies, not just in the campaign. They're still shouting, build the wall. And Trump is saying that they're not going to attach any DACA legislation, any DREAM Act legislation, doesn't have to be attached to wall funding. So he's basically giving that game away, too. So the question is 2 questions. Is he stabbing his supporters in the back, and do we care? I mean, those are the 2 questions, because I should say, I'm a conservative. I'm not a Trumpster. Trump is a far, far, far better deal than Hillary Clinton ever would have been. And anybody who says, if we had Hillary Clinton and we had a Republican Congress, look, the Republican Congress has never done anything to help anybody. Well, they held up Obama, but still, he had got all those judge appointments, all those regulations that he put in there. And now Trump is really putting some really good judges, not just in the Supreme Court, but right down the line. These are things that can never be taken back, and I mean, regulations can be rolled back, but they almost never are, and they are under the Trump administration. So he's doing a lot of good things from a conservative point of view. But here is The Guardian, right? This is this left-wing British publication, and they're selling this narrative. The mainstream establishment Republican leadership made a cynical calculation to tolerate Donald Trump's dangerous faults, believing they could use him to rubber stamp their long-sought conservative legislative agenda. Now, every word in that sentence is untrue. That just does not describe what happened. They made a bargain with a con man, and now he has betrayed them. His deal last week with Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi on debt limits and disaster spending is a huge political betrayal, but make no mistake, for Trump, it's good politics. Americans are fed up with gridlock and dysfunction in the Washington, D.C. swamp, and they blame Republicans as much as Democrats. Furthermore, the legislation, which might pass by making deals with Democrats, polls well across the political spectrum. Okay, so let's start with the whole immigration thing. Because from my perspective, immigration was never the big problem people thought it was. What was the problem was the lawlessness. It's a problem to have your government say we're not going to enforce the law because we're not. I mean, that is an arrogant, tyrannical government. They should have to pass laws, not through executive orders, get them through Congress, and then they should have to enforce them. And every time Obama said, I'm not going to enforce the Defensive Marriage Act, I thought, well, what's the difference then between him and a king? I mean, we elect these guys, they make legislation. We may not like the legislation, so we have to change it. But how if the president just says, I'm going to use prosecutorial, judgment, and we're not going to prosecute those laws, then the laws don't exist. So he's just swiping the laws away just like a king. And I think that that is the thing that really bothered me about immigration. It wasn't rapist and murderer Mexicans coming in. I mean, we've handled plenty of immigration before, but you got to do it legally. You got to have a border. You got to check people through. You got to take the people you want and tell the people who you don't want that they can't come in. So let's take a look at this dinner that went on last night. The three Democrats who were there all come from states that Trump won big. Right, and they're all kind of conservative. So you have Heidi Heitkamp, you have Joe Donnelly from Indiana, and Joe Manchin is the big one from West Virginia. And Manchin he's been a kind of moderate guy. You know, he supports gun rights. He's been against abortion. You know, he's done a lot of things to work across the aisle. So he came out after the meeting, after this dinner, and he said, you know, there was a bipartisan feeling there. This is cut number 2.
It was a very in-depth conversation. Started out with infrastructure, Joe. Talked a lot about infrastructure. Gary went into detail, and the president, you know, basically back and forth of what we could do, the exciting things that can happen, how we can work together, public-private, but also public-private means not just turning things over to the private sector and then they're going to own it and run it, but basically building it quicker and faster, getting through the minutia of all the time constraints of 8 to 10 years to build something when we should be able to do it and permit it in 2 years. So we got into that, and then we got right into the depth of tax reform. And the president was adamant from the get-go. This is not a tax cut for the rich. And I repeat that. This will not be a tax cut for me or any rich people. That kind of started out the conversation. It went pretty good from there.
So he comes out of there happy. These are 3 guys who have not joined the rest of the Democrats in the resistance. So they did vote, for instance, for Gorsuch for the Supreme Court, to approve Gorsuch for the Supreme Court. And, you know, the thing about infrastructure is there's going to be an infrastructure bill. Democrats love this, but Democrats want it to be all government spending, so they control it. They control hiring, gives us tremendous power over who gets hired, who gets contracts, gives them tremendous power to take graft, which Democrats love. And, you know, what Trump is hoping to do is kind of work out some sort of private-public thing, which would be a little bit more conservative. It would be a moderate program. And, of course, the tax thing, you know, they've got to cut corporate taxes. They have not cut. You know, let's hear a little bit more about Manchin on this. He talks about this at number 3, cut number 3, what they're talking about for tax reform.
Tax reform or tax cuts, whatever you want to do, has to be done to where it stimulates the economy, grows the economy on a global basis. It's competitive. You know, we didn't create the market, global market, but we've got to compete in it. Next of all, we can't continue to add to $20 trillion. So you have to be very sensitive. No more debt. You can't add on debt. We've got to see a pathway forward to start bringing this debt down and get ourselves fiscally responsible. And I think that's what that conversation was last night. And what I heard, willing to explore all avenues of this, understanding that Democrats, responsible, moderate, some of us conservative Democrats, who are looking for fiscal responsibility. You know, I've always said this: I'm fiscally responsible and socially compassionate.
So here's an example where Trump is actually not betraying his base at all. The base knew he was going to do this. This is what he talked about. Some of us conservatives may be a little nervous about all the infrastructure spending. We may be nervous that he's going to lose those corporate tax cuts, because those are the big ones. It really is not the middle class tax cuts. It's the corporate tax cuts. And the reason for that is money gets taxed when it moves. Money gets taxed when you spend something, when I spend something, when an employer gives it to you. When money is in motion, it gets taxed. So you can cut corporate taxes, expand business, expand employment, expand production and all these things. And actually, when you cut the rate, you actually make more money because the money is moving a lot faster. All right. So I just have to stop about the Manchin thing, because this is really funny. He's on. What was he on? I think it was CBS. Yeah, CBS, because it was Charlie Rose. And Manchin comes in, and he's been at dinner with the president in this bipartisan dinner. So it's news. It's a real story. They start to run out of time. Here is the question they ask Manchin. This is the question they have got to know about this dinner. Cut number 4.
Senator, before you go, we got to go. But before you go, What was the menu? Chicken, beef, fish? What was it?
It was a medallion. It was a beef medallion, and it was well done.
Did you have, Senator? I hate to pry. I really do. I hate to pry. But did you have 1 scoop or 2 scoops of ice cream?
No. We had. Let me tell you, the ice cream was so perfectly prepared. The ice cream came beside the dessert, Gail, and it looked like an egg. And I said, I wonder why I'm getting an egg with my dessert. And I cut into it, and it was a beautifully sculptured ice cream.
Okay, but the president president is said to love desserts. Did he eat more desserts than you?
No, he did not. No, he did not.
It's unbelievable. They hate this guy so much. No matter what happens in this country, if he blows North Korea off the face of the earth, no matter what he does, if the economy comes roaring back, they hate him personally, and it's not working. It is not keeping his it's not keeping his poll numbers down. Trump has really done everything that has kept his poll numbers down has been generated by Trump himself with kooky tweets and not getting the thing, and by the Congress not getting giving him the deals he wants. But look, this thing with the immigration thing, it doesn't bother me that much. He is enforcing immigration. Illegal immigration is way down. I don't think a wall is going to make any difference. But when a guy gets up at every rally and says we're going to build a wall and Mexico is going to pay for it, he ought to build a wall, and the people who supported him ought to hold him responsible for that. But do I care? No. As a conservative, I just want the rule of law enforced. That is happening. The ICE agents are allowed to work again. The ICE agents love Trump because he set them free to do their jobs. So the answer to the two questions, yeah, I think so far he has not done what he told his supporters he's going to do. Do I care? No. And one of the funny things about me, of course, is because I was not a big Trump believer. I always knew he was not going to do a lot of things he said. I mean, here he is. Let's go back and just remember all those chants of lock him up. Just like a month ago, weeks ago, he held a rally and they were shouting, lock Hillary Clinton up, lock Hillary Clinton up. Well, now Hillary Clinton is roaming around free. She's going out there, selling her book. And let's just go back for a minute to one of the debates where Trump said he was going to have a special prosecutor appointed to investigate the fact that she destroyed emails that were under subpoena.
For you to say that there was nothing wrong with you deleting 39,000 emails, again, you should be ashamed of yourself. What you did, and this is after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress.
We have to move on. Secretary Clinton, you can respond, and then we got to move on.
We want to give the audience a chance
you'd be put in jail, let alone after getting a subpoena from the United States
Secretary
Congress.
Clinton, you can respond.
So recently, Jeff Sessions said he's not going to prosecute Lois Lerner, who was who was right in the thick of that IRS scandal, where the IRS was targeting, and it probably is still targeting, conservative groups and not giving them breaks so that they could use, tax breaks to spread their ideas during the election year. It was very effective. It really kind of undermined the Tea Party as they were gaining steam. And Obama was good at that. Obama was a master politician. He was a Chicago Paul. He knew how to break the backs of his enemies. He really did. And he knew, one of the things that Obama knew is he knew how it can be important not to pass a law, to lose at passing a law, but to win on making it look like the other side was to blame and the other side looks mean, like he did with the DREAM Act. So anyway, now Jeff Sessions says he's not going to prosecute Lois Lerner, and that's a tough one. I mean, I like Jeff Sessions. I suspect if he can't prosecute her, it's because he just can't get the case he wants together, and he doesn't want to spend public money chasing her around if he's not going to catch her. But it really is interesting. Plus, they're making charges. You saw Steve Bannon the other day said that firing James Comey was one of the biggest political mistakes ever. So they asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders about this at the press conference, and she says, yeah, this guy has really broken the law. Comey has broken the law. So she's answering the questions, was it a mistake to fire him? This is cut 6.
The president is proud of the decision that he made. The president was 100% right in firing James Comey. He knew at the time that it could be bad for him politically, but he also knew and felt he had an obligation to do what was right and do what was right for the American people and certainly the men and women at the FBI. I think there's no secret. Comey, by his own self-admission, leaked privileged government information. Weeks before President Trump fired him, Comey testified that an FBI agent engaged in the same practice, they'd face serious repercussions. I think he set his own stage for himself on that front. His actions were improper and likely could have been illegal. Comey leaked memos to the New York Times, your own outlet. He politicized an investigation by signaling he would exonerate Hillary Clinton before he ever interviewed her or other key witnesses. He's very happy with the decision he made, and I think he's been fully vindicated by a lot of those new things and knowing that it was the right one.
So then the next question a reporter asks her, or a couple of questions over, is, are you going to put him away if he broke the law? And she says that is not the president's job. It's not the president's job to appoint a special counsel. It's not the president's job to decide whether to indict and whether to prosecute. So now that he's dealing with the reality of it, it's a lot different. It's a lot different to ask Jeff Sessions to go after Hillary Clinton, to ask him to go after James Comey. All those chants of lock him up, and it's entirely possible. And this is something because conservatives are not only laughing at his supporters, they're laughing at conservatives who said, well, we'll see what we can get out of this guy. But really, that's silly because it's very possible that his supporters understood that he was carrying them along on emotion, but they still hoped he would do a better job than anybody else who's going to go on there and be more responsible to them. And I think on that score, he is, even though he hasn't fulfilled his promises. It's a really weird situation because Trump is a very emotional figure and people are attached to him emotionally. And those of us who care about policy are kind of confused. Well, he said he would do this, but he's not doing that. But I don't think that's what people are following him for. I think they're following him for an attitude. And I think he's delivered that attitude in spades. So just to finish off this thought, Trump is, in some sense, not delivering the things that he told his supporters he would deliver, but we don't necessarily have to care because it doesn't mean he's doing a bad job, and it certainly doesn't mean that we conservatives are getting a worse deal than we would have gotten if the only other choice on the ballot had been elected. I think we're getting a much better deal than we would have gotten. There are going to be things up ahead. So far, because I don't care that much about immigration except as a point of law, so far he hasn't done anything that has made my teeth grind together, but he will. He's going to do some left-wing stuff that's going to drive me crazy and maybe you crazy too. So we'll watch for that. But so far, all he's doing is getting the gears of government moving again after 8 years of an uncompromising ideologue in Obama who really did jam things up. So if he starts to get a little bipartisan support, that wouldn't be entirely a bad thing.